The city skyline glimmered beneath my office window, the late afternoon sun bouncing off glass towers, painting everything gold. I traced the edge of my silk blouse with a fingertip, feeling the delicate fabric against my skin, a quiet reminder of how far I'd come. My phone buzzed against the polished oak desk. I glanced at it and froze. A single message. From my mother. "Olivia, can we talk? We need you." I stared at the words, a bitter smile forming. Years ago, I would have run to answer, heart pounding, hoping for reconciliation. But those days were gone. I'd been the girl they called useless, the one they kicked out when I had nothing but bruised pride and empty suitcases. Now, in my minimalist office surrounded by art I'd bought with my own money, I felt the weight of irony. They wanted me back. I sipped my coffee, inhaling the aroma, and let myself remember. The tiny apartment I had fled to, the nights I cried on a mattress on the floor, the sting of every word they'd thrown at me. And yet here I was, standing taller than I'd ever imagined, quietly victorious. I put the phone down and breathed deeply. The past had its ghosts, but ghosts don't own me anymore. I was 19, clutching my backpack like a lifeline, standing in the middle of the kitchen where every word my parents had ever spoken seemed to echo louder than the clatter of dishes. My mother's eyes were sharp, her jaw tight. "You're useless, Olivia," she snapped, her voice slicing through me. "You'll never amount to anything. Maybe it's better if you just leave." My father didn't say a word. He just nodded, as if agreeing silently that I had no place in their house or their expectations. The lump in my throat grew, and for the first time, I felt the world truly tilt beneath me. My hand shook. I gripped the strap of my bag, so tightly my knuckles turned white. "You don't even try," my mother continued, her words venomous. "Why do we even bother with you?" I wanted to scream, to beg, to make them see me, but something inside me refused. I remembered the small, leather-bound notebook my grandmother had given me the previous Christmas, the one she insisted I fill with my dreams, sketches, and little victories. She had whispered, "No one can take your worth from you, Olivia. Not even them." That thought gave me a strange courage. I stuffed the notebook into my bag, along with the few clothes I could carry. I refused to cry, not because I didn't feel it, but because I needed to stand for myself, even if no one else did. As I stepped out the front door, I felt the chill of the autumn wind bite through my coat. My parents' voices faded behind me, replaced by the steady thump of my own heartbeat. Each step on the sidewalk felt heavy, yet strangely liberating. For the first time, I realized that leaving wasn't a failure. It was the beginning of something I couldn't yet see, but I could feel in my bones. The city stretched ahead of me, vast and unknowable, full of strangers, possibilities, and risks. I had nothing but determination and a notebook full of dreams. And that, I told myself, was enough. The first few months after leaving home were brutal. I slept on a thin mattress in a cramped studio apartment, the radiator clanging every night as I tried to ignore the gnawing hunger in my stomach. I took any job I could find, waitressing, dog walking, tutoring, but the real dream, the one I'd scribbled in my grandmother's notebook, never left my mind. One rainy evening, drenched from head to toe, I wandered into a small co-working space downtown. It smelled of coffee and old books, and the quiet hum of keyboards made me feel alive in a way the world outside never had. That's where I met Clara Donovan, a seasoned marketing executive in her late 40s, known for taking chances on overlooked talent. "You've got fire, kid," she said after I shared my ideas for a social media campaign I'd been working on in secret. "Most people would give up halfway, but not you. I'll help you if you can handle the work." I nodded, barely containing my excitement. Long nights followed, each punctuated by self-doubt and frustration. Mistakes were frequent, clients were harsh, and the fear of failure was constant. But Clara's belief never wavered. "You're capable," she would say, pressing a folder of notes into my hands. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Slowly, I began to see results. My first big client, a small boutique struggling to find an online presence, praised my strategy. The first profitable sale I orchestrated felt like a personal triumph. I celebrated quietly, a cup of coffee in my hands, scribbling the wins in my notebook, never posting them online, never giving my family a glimpse. With each success, I felt my confidence solidify. I rented a modest office, decorated it with a few pieces of art that spoke to me, and began taking on bigger clients. I invested every extra dollar back into learning, attending workshops, and building my skills. I stayed off social media mostly, only posting innocuous photos, careful to avoid revealing the truth of my growing empire. The hardest part wasn't the work, it was keeping the secret. Every time my mother or a distant cousin asked about my life, I smiled and said, "I'm fine, just busy." Inside, I was a storm of pride and vindication. I was finally building a life that was mine alone, without the approval of anyone who had once called me worthless. By the time I turned 24, I had a small but thriving business, clients who trusted me implicitly, and a life that, from the outside, seemed effortless. But every night, as I closed my office door and stared at the city lights, I knew the real victory wasn't just in the numbers. It was in the independence I'd carved out from the ruins of rejection. The knock at the office door was soft but insistent. I glanced up from my desk, running a hand through my hair. My assistant, unaware of the full story, had left the room, giving me the space to face them. When the door swung open, my heart skipped a beat, not with fear, but with a strange thrill. There they were, my mother, my father, and my younger brother, all wearing the same expressions I remembered from years ago: skepticism, expectation, and, if I looked closely, just a hint of guilt. "Olivia," my mother began, her voice a mix of caution and forced warmth. I held up a hand, letting the silence stretch. They took tentative steps into the office, their eyes scanning the space. My gaze didn't falter. I watched their reactions, the sharp inhale when they saw the abstract painting I'd commissioned, the way my desk gleamed under the afternoon sun, the rows of neatly stacked awards and client contracts framed elegantly on the walls. "This is impressive," my father murmured, though the words sounded like a question more than a compliment. I smiled, calm, measured. "Thank you. It's taken years of work." I gestured toward the sleek office layout. "Everything here? I built it. From the ground up. Every client, every sale, every decision, I made it happen." Their eyes widened. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. My brother's gaze darted to a framed certificate on the wall: Top Entrepreneur Under 25 to 2025. He swallowed, his voice barely audible. You did all this?" "Yes," I said simply. "I did. Without anyone's help. Without being told I was worthless every day." My voice softened but remained firm. "You told me I'd never make it, that I was useless. But here I am." They shuffled closer, but I didn't move. I let them take it all in, the subtle luxury, yes, but more importantly, the independence and self-respect that radiated from the space. I could see the realization settle in their eyes. They had expected a defeated young woman. Instead, they faced someone transformed, someone who had not only survived but thrived. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Olivia, we didn't realize." I shook my head slightly. "No, you didn't. And that's exactly the point. You judged me at my lowest, when I had nothing. And now, if you want to be part of my life, you'll need to understand that I've changed, and I won't go back to being the girl you dismissed." I walked slowly toward my bookshelf, picking up my grandmother's old leather notebook. Holding it up, I let them see it. This is where it began. This is where I decided I was worth more than anyone ever told me I was. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father's jaw tightened. My brother's expression was somewhere between awe and guilt. I set the notebook down carefully on the desk and returned to my seat, letting the silence weigh heavy. Finally, my mother whispered, almost breaking, We want to make things right." I leaned back in my chair, the afternoon light catching the edges of my silhouette. I was calm. I was in control. And for the first time in years, they were the ones standing on uncertain ground. I watched them carefully, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the guilt that lingered in their eyes. For years, they had held the power, judgment, rejection, dismissal, but now, the balance had shifted. I had the upper hand, and with it came responsibility. Not to punish, but to guide, firmly and without compromise. "Listen," I began, my voice steady, resonant. "I'm willing to let you back into my life, but on certain terms. Things have to change. You can't just pick up where we left off." My mother nodded hesitantly, tears brimming. My father's hands were folded tightly, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of my words. "First," I said, looking directly at her, "you must acknowledge the way you treated me. No excuses, no justifications. You need to admit that calling me useless and throwing me out when I had nothing was wrong. Until you do, there's no trust." She swallowed hard, a trembling whisper escaping. I understand. I'm sorry." "Second," I continued, turning to my father, "I need you to respect my boundaries. I am my own person. Decisions about my career, my finances, and my personal life are mine alone. If you want a relationship with me, it must be equal, honest, and free of judgment." He exhaled slowly, finally meeting my gaze. I understand, Olivia. I do." I glanced at my brother. "And you," I said, softening slightly, "need to stop relying on me to solve your problems. You need to take responsibility for your own life. I won't enable laziness or excuses. But I will support your growth if you show initiative." He nodded quickly, eyes wide, as if the rules were both frightening and fair. "Lastly," I said, my voice calm but firm, "if any of you want to be in my life moving forward, there must be effort. Therapy, self-reflection, growth, whatever it takes. I care about you, but I won't allow old patterns to poison my life again. This is non-negotiable." They were quiet, absorbing the weight of each word. I let the silence stretch, letting them feel the full impact of the truth. Then I picked up the leather-bound notebook from my grandmother, the one that had carried me through those first desperate months. I held it out. "This is what I built my life on. Self-worth, perseverance, and belief in myself. I want you to witness it, not diminish it. Learn from it, if you choose to be part of my life." My mother reached out tentatively, brushing a finger across its worn cover. My father and brother exchanged glances, and in that moment, I saw the flicker of understanding, the realization that they would have to earn the privilege of being near me, of sharing in my success. I leaned back in my chair, confident, serene. The power had shifted. For the first time, I could care for them without sacrificing my peace, my dignity, or my independence. I had created the rules of this new life, and anyone who wanted to stay in it would have to respect them. Weeks passed after our confrontation, and change, small but steady, began to take root. My mother attended therapy sessions, learning to soften her harsh judgments. My father joined her in reflection, asking questions he never dared before, trying to understand how his silence had hurt me. My brother found a job and started taking responsibility for his life, and I watched, quietly proud, as they each made the effort to grow. Through it all, I remained grounded in the lessons my grandmother had taught me. I still kept her leather-bound notebook on my desk, now filled with more than dreams. It held the story of my survival, my triumph, and my integrity. Every time I glanced at it, I remembered that the power to shape my life had always been mine. I spent quiet evenings in my office, looking out over the city that had once seemed impossible to navigate alone. The skyline sparkled with possibility, reflecting the journey I had walked, from a 19-year-old girl, trembling and discarded, to a woman who had built her world from scratch. I allowed myself a small, contented smile. I had survived the worst, and I had grown stronger for it. One afternoon, my mother brought me a cup of coffee without asking for anything in return. She smiled genuinely. "Thank you for letting us back in," she said softly. I nodded, sensing the sincerity in her words. I realized that love, when paired with accountability and growth, could exist without compromise or pain. I picked up the notebook and traced my fingers over its worn leather, feeling the weight of its lessons. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. No one can take your worth from you.
She had been right.
And now, I was free to carry that truth forward, not as a child yearning for approval, but as a woman who knew her own value. The journey had been long, painful, and beautiful all at once. I had learned that resilience wasn't just about surviving. It was about transforming pain into power, rejection into clarity, and loneliness into self-respect. As the city lights shimmered beneath me, I whispered to myself, a quiet vow and declaration all at once. I am not the girl you called useless. I am everything you never believed I could be, and more. And now, I choose who stays in my life. And with that, I let the past settle, not as a weight on my shoulders, but as a foundation beneath my feet, solid, unshakable, and mine alone.